Suspected serial killer D'Angelo Martin was back in court again today, charged in yet another case where his alleged victim survived.
In the shadow of Detroit's decay, where abandoned houses stand like tombstones of a forgotten city, a predator walked among the forgotten. Between February 2018 and June 2019, 4 women would disappear into the darkness of these vacant structures and emerge only as corpses, posed in humiliation, left to rot among the debris of a city that had already turned its back on them. This is the story of D'Angelo Kenneth Martin, a serial killer who preyed on Detroit's most vulnerable women. But it's also the story of systemic failure, of lives deemed disposable, and of a police force that let a monster roam free for over 15 years. D'Angelo Kenneth Martin, born May 30th, 1985, 34 years old, when his reign of terror finally ended. But by then, 4 women were dead, 2 more had barely escaped with their lives, and a city lived in fear. Martin's hunting ground was Detroit's East Side, a wasteland of abandoned houses where the forgotten went to hide from a world that had already forgotten them. Here, among the ruins of the American dream, he would lure women into empty houses, rape them, murder them, and leave their bodies posed in degrading positions, as if their deaths weren't humiliation enough. The killing spree we know about began in February 2018, but investigators suspect Martin's violence started much earlier. What we know for certain is this: between 2018 and 2019, Martin transformed abandoned Detroit houses into his personal slaughterhouse. 4 women, 4 mothers, daughters, sisters, 4 lives cut short by a monster who believed they were disposable. Annetta Nelson, 57 years old, became Martin's first confirmed victim on the 26th of February, 2018. Found in an abandoned house on Winthrop Street, her body discovered by a homeless man who initially became the prime suspect. Annetta had been strangled and beaten to death, her body left face down in a vacant house that had become her tomb. Nancy Harrison, 52, was discovered the 19th of March, 2019, in an abandoned house on Coventry Street. Martin would later admit he beat Nancy to death with a 2x4. Nancy left behind a daughter, Lisa Hohenstreider, whose pain would echo through the courtroom years later. "I've waited 3 years for this day, the day that you rot in hell, D'Angelo Martin." Trevsine Ellis, 55, was found dead on May 24th, 2019, in another abandoned house on Lyndhurst Street. Her body was so decomposed that the cause of death couldn't be determined. Her brother Anthony Ellis would later say, "My sister would be alive today if the police had done their jobs. She always looked out for everyone and didn't deserve to die this way." Tamara Jones, 55, was the final victim, discovered the 5th of June, 2019, in a vacant house on Mack Avenue. Her decomposing body was found just 2 days after another woman had escaped Martin's attack in the very same house. These women lived on society's margins. All were linked to sex work, drug use, or both. They survived in a world that had abandoned them long before Martin found them. But they were mothers, daughters, human beings who deserved to live, to love, to matter. To understand the monster, we must first understand the boy. D'Angelo Kenneth Martin was born in 1985 and raised by his mother, Chantrines Barker, in Detroit, until she was arrested in 1998 for the kidnapping and murder of a 28-year-old Detroit man. Barker had permitted kidnappers to hold a rival drug dealer in her basement while they extorted money from his suppliers and family. She bought food for the kidnappers as they burned the 27-year-old captive with cigarettes and heated nickels and stabbed him with a bayonet. Martin was just 13 years old when his mother was convicted of felony murder and sentenced to life in prison. It is not known if Martin was home during the kidnapping, but after his mother's arrest, Martin lived with his grandparents or on the streets. Kyle Brother Joe Hicks, a minister, said he first met Martin 2 decades ago when the teenager was sheltering with other homeless men under a downtown amphitheater. Even then, Martin was lost, a boy abandoned by the system, failed by those meant to protect him. But trauma doesn't excuse evil, and Martin's descent into darkness was a choice, made again and again with each life he took. Detroit's abandoned houses became Martin's killing fields. "Our guys find dead bodies in abandoned houses all the time," said Mike Nevin, president of the Detroit Firefighters Association Union. When people go missing in Detroit, what's the first thing they do? They start looking in vacant houses and buildings. All victims were found face down with a used condom nearby. Martin posed all of his victims in humiliating ways. He also left used condoms containing biological fluids near each crime scene and stole a sock from every victim. These weren't crimes of passion. They were calculated, ritualistic. Martin had developed a signature, a calling card that spoke to his need not just to kill but to degrade, to assert dominance even in death. Police began a massive operation, eventually combing through more than 300 abandoned homes to search for other victims and evidence. Each house searched revealed the scope of Detroit's blight problem and how that blight provided cover for a predator. He targeted the invisible women society had already discarded. Police Chief James Craig described sex workers as a marginalized community who are often reluctant to speak to police and may not be in regular contact with family who may otherwise report them missing, posing a challenge for investigators.
And it was through that signature that we believed that there was some connection. But again, we are still very much involved in this investigation.
Martin was methodical. All 5 victims were linked to sex work, drug use, or both. Most of the victims were in their early 52nd, another common factor among the crimes. Martin exploited this vulnerability. He knew these women's disappearances might go unnoticed for days, even weeks. He knew the police response would be slower, the investigation less thorough. Martin lured women to abandoned houses where he raped and strangled them to death. Each location carefully chosen, each victim selected for their vulnerability. This wasn't random violence, it was predatory, calculated evil. But 2 women survived Martin's attacks. Their stories, their courage, would ultimately bring him down. On May 6, 2019, Martin met a 26-year-old woman at a drug den and invited her back to his residence, where he raped her and stabbed her in the neck. She fought, she survived, she became the key that would unlock Martin's reign of terror. On the 3rd of June, a 51-year-old woman woke up on her back in a dark, abandoned house, pinned down by a man with his hands pressed into her neck. "I'm about to die," she recalled thinking. "Kill me and rape me," she thought was his plan. But then she remembered the blade, a red box cutter she carried for protection. She pulled it out, flicked it open, and started stabbing. "I just stuck him," she testified. "And then I went back again and stuck him again." His blood spurted onto her clothes as she leaped up and jumped out a window, fleeing down the empty street for help. "I'm ready," she said before Martin's trial, her voice steady despite everything she'd endured. "He really messed my life up."
I mean, he choked me, and I passed out. And then when I came back to myself, I said, "Oh no, you're not about to die now."
The investigation into D'Angelo Martin should have ended before it began. Over 15 years, Detroit police failed to follow up on leads or take investigative steps that may have averted the eventual killing spree, despite having received repeated warnings that Martin was a violent predator. The bungling started in 2004, when evidence from the rape of a 41-year-old woman was stored in a kit and then forgotten for years in a warehouse, along with thousands of others. When police finally reopened the investigation, the victim had long been dead. The lapses continued all the way into 2018, when police arrested the wrong man in a strangling. Even after a state crime lab linked Martin's DNA to the death, police only sought his arrest weeks after he had raped a woman in his grandmother's basement in 2019 and had killed thrice more. Detroit's Internal Affairs Branch issued a 247-page report that found the agency's sex crimes unit did not properly handle DNA hits. An internal affairs supervisor summed up the debacles as a total systemic breakdown. D'Angelo Martin was arrested at a Detroit bus stop on the 7th of June, 2019. The man who had terrorized Detroit's East Side for over a year was taken into custody without incident, just hours after police had named him a person of interest. After the second surviving victim identified him as her attacker, police took blood and saliva samples from Martin, which linked him to the 4 murders. The blood on the surviving woman's pants, Martin's blood, shed as she fought for her life, would seal his fate. Martin was charged with 4 counts of first-degree premeditated murder and 4 counts of first-degree felony murder with criminal sexual conduct in the 3rd degree. Martin was sentenced on the 6th of October, 2022, and is now imprisoned in the Muskegon Correctional Facility. Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan pledged to quickly board up the remaining vacant houses in a city where about 19,000 similar properties have already been demolished in the past 5 years. During the sentencing, family members spoke about how their lives had changed. Nancy Harrison's daughter, Lisa Hohenstreiter, said, "You're the perfect example of why Michigan should have the death penalty. I hope you rot in hell for eternity. My sister would be alive today if the police had done their jobs," said Anthony Ellis, the brother of Trevasine Ellis. "She always looked out for everyone and didn't deserve to die this way." But anger wasn't enough. Plans were underway to board up about 2,000 vacant houses across Detroit by summer's end. The city finally acknowledged what residents had known for years. Abandoned houses were killing fields, and something had to be done. Martin also became a suspect in several other murders, including that of Deborah Reynolds, who was last seen alive with Martin in a 7-Eleven. In December of 2018, her body was later discovered in a vacant home. Police searched over 3,000 abandoned houses in Detroit in search of more potential victims. How many more bodies lie undiscovered in Detroit's abandoned houses? How many more victims will never be found, never be identified, never be mourned? "It's astonishing," said Jim Trainum, a retired Washington, D.C. homicide detective. "All the police had to do was one little thing here or there, and they would have put a stop to this whole process, and these women would still be alive. Just one thing." Today, D'Angelo Kenneth Martin sits in a Michigan prison cell, serving 45 to 70 years for his crimes. He will likely die behind bars. But the women he killed, Annetta Nelson, Nancy Harrison, Trevasine Ellis, and Tamra Jones, they remain forever 57, 52, 55, and 55. Forever silenced, forever gone. Their ghosts haunt the abandoned houses of Detroit, reminding us that in a city of ruins, the greatest tragedy isn't the collapse of buildings, it's the collapse of our humanity. It's the moment we decided some lives matter less than others. In the end, Martin didn't just kill 4 women. He exposed the raw in a system designed to protect the vulnerable, but instead abandoned them. And somewhere, in the shadows of Detroit's remaining abandoned houses, their spirits cry out for a justice that came too late, for a dignity they were denied in life, and for a world that finally sees them not as statistics, not as disposables, but as human beings who deserve to live.